Jonathan hadn't expected this day to come, nor did he believe it would change anything about his life. A CEO at 35, with a sharp mind and an even sharper sense of self-control, Jonathan had always placed business above everything. Emotions, attachments, love, all of that was something he kept at arm's length. He'd seen the damage that feelings could do, and he wasn't willing to risk it. Today, however, felt different. Today, he was about to marry a woman he had never truly met, by contract. A marriage of convenience. No promises, no fairy tale. Just a quiet arrangement with no strings attached. His family had insisted, duty, legacy, the company's future. Jonathan had only agreed because it was the easiest way to fulfill his obligations. There would be no love, no emotions to deal with. He didn't need that complication in his life. Or so he thought. The ceremony was short, almost clinical. He stood in a room with only the necessary witnesses, his lawyer, her lawyer, and a few others who hardly mattered. The air in the room was thick with an unspoken formality. He could feel the weight of their expectations bearing down on him, but none of it felt real. His gaze drifted to the woman standing beside him. Evelyn. She was so different from what he had imagined. He had seen a photo, of course, but that image didn't do justice to the woman before him. She was delicate, yet there was something about her that seemed impenetrable. Her eyes, dark as night, were distant, as though her mind was somewhere far away. She was beautiful, but in a quiet, almost reserved way. No flashy makeup, no excessive attention-grabbing gestures. She wore a simple, modest dress, and her demeanor was detached. They exchanged vows, but Jonathan's thoughts were elsewhere. The words seemed to blur together as the official's voice droned on. This was business, not love. That was all that mattered. The contract was signed. The deal was done. Afterward, they sat together in a modest hotel room, the only honeymoon arrangement they could afford. Jonathan knew what was expected, nothing more than a simple marriage by contract, and then they would live separate lives. She would remain in the shadows of his world, quietly fulfilling her role. He would continue running the company. Nothing complicated. No need for feelings. Evelyn was quiet, sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Jonathan sat across from her, feeling the awkwardness seep into the air. He could tell she was nervous. That was understandable. He felt the same way. This was a strange situation for both of them, but it wasn't one that warranted much emotion. Or so he told himself. So, Jonathan said, breaking the silence, "This is it. We're married. We live our separate lives, as agreed." Evelyn looked at him, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. There was something there, a flicker of vulnerability, an emotion he couldn't quite place. "Do you have any questions?" Jonathan asked, his voice softer than he had intended. She shook her head, her eyes looking down at her hands. "No questions." Jonathan leaned back, trying to shake off the discomfort that was beginning to settle in his chest. This wasn't supposed to be hard. It was just a contract. She was just a part of the deal. But as the evening wore on, he began to notice something about Evelyn that he hadn't anticipated. There was a distance between them, but it wasn't the kind of coldness he was used to in business dealings. This was different. She wasn't just distant, she was closed off. He caught her glancing at the door a few times, as though she wanted to leave, as though she was waiting for something or someone. But no one was coming. She was alone with him, just like he was alone with her. The silence stretched, and the weight of it began to feel suffocating. Jonathan stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the night sky. He hated the way the tension in the room kept building. It was like there was something lurking just beneath the surface, something he wasn't seeing. He turned back to her, his curiosity getting the better of him. "Why did you agree to this?" Evelyn raised her head slightly, but her eyes avoided his. She seemed to consider the question for a long moment before speaking. "I didn't have much of a choice," she said quietly. "Sometimes, you just do what's needed, even if it doesn't make sense." Jonathan frowned. He wasn't sure if she was speaking about the marriage, or about something deeper. He didn't know if he wanted to know. But there was something in her voice, a subtle, almost imperceptible crack, that made him want to understand. He sighed, deciding to let the matter go for now. "I'll give you space," he said, heading for the door. "Tomorrow, we'll talk about the details. There's no need for anything more right now." But as he reached for the door handle, he heard her voice again. "Jonathan," she said, her voice hesitant. He paused, turning to look at her. "Yeah?" There was a long silence before she spoke again. "I need to tell you something." His heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure why, but her tone made him uneasy. The calmness of the moment suddenly felt fragile. He walked back to the bed, sitting down beside her, his curiosity piquing. "What is it?" Evelyn took a deep breath, and for the first time since they had met, she looked directly at him. Her eyes were full of something he couldn't quite read, fear, maybe. Regret. Maybe a mix of both. I'm a virgin." The words hit Jonathan like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't the fact itself that shocked him, it was the way she said it, as if she had been carrying this secret for far too long. "I don't understand," Jonathan murmured, his voice low, more to himself than to her. "Why didn't you tell me?" Evelyn shifted uncomfortably, her hands gripping the edge of her dress. "It didn't feel like something I could share. I never thought it would matter." Jonathan's mind raced, trying to piece together the information. This wasn't just a casual revelation. This was a bombshell, dropped with the kind of gravity that made him question everything. Why hadn't she told him? Was it a lie? A cover-up? Or was it something more? But what unnerved him the most was the way his chest tightened at the thought of it. The way his pulse quickened as the weight of her words sank in. What was she hiding? And why did it make him feel something real, for the first time since he had entered this contract? For a moment, neither of them spoke. Jonathan's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, questions, and doubts. He had to know more, but part of him feared what might be uncovered next. But Evelyn wasn't done. "There's more," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's not just that. There's something else, something you need to know." Jonathan leaned in, his eyes fixed on her. "Tell me." She hesitated. The silence was unbearable. But then, she spoke. "I'm not just a virgin. I've never been touched, not in the way you think. There's a reason I haven't done anything. And I can't explain it yet, but I will. I just need you to understand that this is more complicated than you think." Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. His mind was reeling. What could she possibly mean by that? What kind of life had she lived before this moment? And why was he starting to feel that same pull toward her, a pull he'd sworn he would never feel again? The answers would come, but Jonathan knew one thing for sure, nothing would be the same from here on out. Jonathan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, Evelyn's words echoed in his mind. "I'm not just a virgin. I've never been touched, not in the way you think. There's a reason I haven't done anything. And I can't explain it yet, but I will." He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something much deeper behind her words, something he wasn't seeing, something that hadn't been revealed yet. His mind refused to let go of the mystery. Why would she hide something like that? And why did it feel so important? The weight of the contract seemed to vanish in the face of this new uncertainty. A marriage for convenience, they had agreed. But something about Evelyn didn't sit right. There was a gap, an emptiness in her, one that felt like it was hiding something far beyond what he was capable of understanding. As the hours passed, Jonathan tossed and turned in his bed. He tried to focus on the details, what he could control, but his thoughts kept returning to her. Her pale, delicate face. The way she looked at him when she spoke of her past. The way her voice trembled when she confessed the truth. Was it just fear? Or was it something else? The morning light broke through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room. Jonathan finally decided that he couldn't wait any longer. He needed to talk to Evelyn. When he entered the living room, she was already up.
Sitting by the window, her back to him. She didn't turn when he entered, as if she was waiting for him to come to her. "I'm not here to pressure you," Jonathan said, his voice softer than he had intended. "But I need to know what's going on. You said there's more to your story." Evelyn didn't respond at first. She simply stared out the window, her face unreadable. Jonathan felt the weight of the silence hanging between them. "Evelyn," he pressed, "I can't just pretend I don't know something's wrong. Something's not right, and I need you to explain." Finally, she turned around to face him. Her expression was calm, but there was a certain sadness in her eyes, an unmistakable pain that Jonathan couldn't ignore. "Maybe it's time you know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan sat down across from her, his hands resting on his knees. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he was prepared for something that would shake him to his core. Evelyn had already proven that nothing about this marriage, or her, was as simple as it seemed. "I wasn't just raised in a strict family, Jonathan," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "It wasn't just about rules or traditions. I was kept from the world. Kept isolated. I don't even know where to start." Jonathan leaned in, sensing that this was more than just a past relationship or a choice she had made. There was a dark undercurrent to her words, something he hadn't expected. "What do you mean? What happened?" Evelyn's eyes flickered to the floor, as if she was afraid to make eye contact. "I was raised in a place where I wasn't allowed to interact with anyone outside of my family. My father was protective, but in a way that went beyond what was normal. He controlled everything in my life, Jonathan. Every decision, every move I made. Even who I spoke to. It wasn't just about protecting me, it was about keeping me hidden from the world." Jonathan was stunned. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit, but they didn't make sense. What kind of father did that? And why? Evelyn continued, her voice cracking as she spoke. "I was never allowed to experience life like other people. No friends. No social events. No school dances or birthday parties. My father believed that the world was dangerous, that people couldn't be trusted, and he didn't want me to be exposed to any of it. He kept me sheltered." Jonathan felt a wave of shock and disbelief wash over him. He'd heard of overprotective parents, but this was something far worse. "So you grew up like this, isolated?" he asked. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what she was telling him. "Yes," Evelyn nodded, her face pale. "I was trained in certain things, basic life skills, a bit of education, but nothing that would allow me to leave the house. I wasn't allowed to go outside unless it was for a specific purpose. And even then, I was watched closely. Always." Jonathan felt a deep sadness stir inside him.
How could a father do that to his own daughter? He couldn't imagine what it must have been like for Evelyn, never experiencing the normal milestones of life, never forming friendships, never feeling truly free. But why? Why would he do that? Jonathan asked, his voice filled with concern. What was he afraid of? Evelyn hesitated for a moment before speaking again, her voice barely audible. He believed that the outside world was corrupt. He thought that if I got involved with people, I would be tainted. He wanted to protect me from all of it, to keep me pure. But what he didn't understand was that in doing so, he was destroying me in ways I can't even describe. Jonathan's heart ached for her. It was clear that she had suffered deeply, trapped in a life she never asked for, and yet, it wasn't just her father's actions that had caused her pain. It was the way she had been taught to view herself, isolated, controlled, and ultimately alone. Evelyn, I had no idea, Jonathan murmured, struggling to find the right words. That kind of life, it's unimaginable. You never had a chance to live. To feel free. I can't even begin to understand how it must have felt. Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes meeting his for the first time. It's hard to explain, but I've spent my entire life under his thumb. I was never allowed to think for myself, make my own decisions, or experience the world. And when he passed away a few months ago, I was finally free. Or at least, I thought I was. Jonathan didn't know what to say. Her father's death had clearly been a turning point for her, a moment of freedom, but it was also a moment of terrifying uncertainty. Evelyn was not just a woman with a secret past. She was someone who had spent her entire life trapped in a cage, and now, she was learning how to live again. The reality of what she had gone through hit him like a ton of bricks. So when I agreed to this marriage, she continued, her voice steadier now, it wasn't just to escape. It was to have some semblance of control. My family's pressure to get married, it's just another part of the system I've been trapped in. But now that I'm here, I'm starting to realize that I don't have to be controlled anymore. And that's terrifying. Jonathan swallowed hard. He couldn't believe the weight of her words. She was right, her entire life had been one of control, fear, and isolation. And now, she was facing the freedom to make her own choices, to step into a world that was both exciting and overwhelming. Evelyn, Jonathan began softly, I'm not here to control you. You don't owe me anything. If this marriage was a means to an end, if it's just a contract for you, I understand. But I can't help but feel that there's something more to this. Something more between us. Evelyn's gaze softened. I don't know what I feel, Jonathan. This is all new to me. Everything is new. But I don't want to lie to you anymore. There's more to me than just this contract. And I think you deserve to know the truth. Jonathan didn't speak. He simply reached across the table and took her hand, a gesture that felt right, a gesture that made the connection between them feel real. For the first time since they'd met, Evelyn didn't pull away. And Jonathan knew that whatever secrets still remained, whatever truths were hidden in the shadows, he was determined to uncover them, no matter where the path would lead. But that wasn't all. In the days that followed, Jonathan's obsession with the mystery of Evelyn deepened. Her past wasn't the only secret she held. Something was lurking beneath the surface, a mystery that went far beyond what she had told him. And Jonathan would soon find that in this marriage, the biggest secrets had yet to be revealed. The weeks following Evelyn's revelation were a blur for Jonathan. Every time he saw her, he was reminded of the complex mystery she carried, an enigma wrapped in vulnerability, one that kept him awake at night. Though they'd talked about her past in bits and pieces, she had never given him the full picture. Each day, he found himself inching closer to the truth, but still, there was a barrier he couldn't cross. Evelyn, for all her openness, still held something back. He could feel it, a wall just beyond his reach. It wasn't just the past that puzzled him, it was the way Evelyn behaved in certain situations. The moments when she would suddenly shut down, retreating into a shell that she had learned to construct over the years. The way she would pull away at the slightest hint of vulnerability, like she was protecting herself from something, or someone. The fear was still there, lurking behind her composed exterior. Jonathan couldn't help but wonder, what had truly happened to her? What kind of experiences had she endured to build such walls? He spent long nights at his desk, searching for answers, trying to piece together what she had told him. But the more he searched, the more confused he became. Evelyn's father had kept her under tight control, yes. But what was he really hiding from the world? What was the source of this fear that seemed to stretch back beyond the time she spent isolated in her father's home? The answer eluded him, and it only made him more determined to find out. It was a Saturday afternoon when Jonathan found himself standing outside the gates of an old, weathered house. A house that Evelyn had mentioned in passing during one of their conversations, her childhood home. It stood on the edge of town, isolated from the rest of society, just as Evelyn had been. The mansion, though large, seemed to have lost much of its grandeur over the years. The ivy that crept up its walls made it appear as if the house was being consumed by nature itself, struggling to hold on to its former glory. Jonathan had come here not because Evelyn had asked him to, but because he couldn't ignore the feeling that something crucial lay within those walls. Something that Evelyn hadn't yet shared with him. And he knew that if he wanted to understand the truth of her past, he needed to see it for himself. He rang the doorbell, though he had no idea what he would find on the other side. The house was still in the family, but Evelyn had told him that it was now mostly abandoned. Her father had passed away, and her mother, who had never been in the picture, remained a mystery to him. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a tall, slender woman. Her hair was streaked with silver, and her face was covered in a heavy veil of sadness. There was something familiar about her, but Jonathan couldn't place it immediately. "I'm sorry, but do I know you?" she asked, her voice soft but wary. Jonathan felt a pang of guilt. He had hoped to just slip in unnoticed, but now that he stood before her, he realized how wrong that approach had been. "My name is Jonathan Carter," he said, trying to keep his tone respectful. I'm here to speak with Evelyn's mother. I believe she used to live here." The woman's face faltered for a moment, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Evelyn," she whispered. "You're here because of her?" Jonathan nodded slowly. "Yes. I know it's been years since she left. But I'm trying to understand more about her past. About what happened here. I think she's hiding something from me." The woman's expression softened, and she stepped aside to allow him into the house. "You'd better come in, then. You've been looking for answers, haven't you?" Jonathan followed her into the house, the air thick with the scent of aged wood and dust. It felt like a place frozen in time, a house that hadn't seen life in years. The walls were lined with faded photographs and antique furniture, remnants of a family that had once lived there but was now lost in the haze of memory. "Why don't you sit down?" The woman motioned to a worn armchair. "I'm Olivia, by the way. Evelyn's aunt." Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't known about Evelyn's aunt. Evelyn had never mentioned her. He sat down cautiously, watching her closely as she settled into the chair across from him. Her eyes were kind but sad, as though she had seen too much in her life. "You're right," Olivia said after a long pause. "Evelyn has always been secretive. She always has been. But I think she deserves to know the truth. She's never heard it from me, not really. And it's time someone told you." Jonathan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean? What truth?" Olivia's hands trembled as she clasped them together. "There's a reason Evelyn's father kept her locked away. There's a reason why she couldn't go to school, couldn't make friends, couldn't leave the house. But you have to understand, it wasn't all for her protection. It was something much darker." Jonathan's mind raced. "What do you mean? What could be so dark that he would keep her isolated?" Olivia let out a shaky breath. Her father wasn't just controlling. He was obsessed. You see, he believed in something. He believed that Evelyn was the key to something greater, something dangerous. He thought she had powers. That she was capable of things that other people couldn't even begin to understand. Jonathan stared at her, disbelief washing over him. "Powers? What are you talking about?" Olivia met his gaze, her eyes darkening. "I don't know exactly what he thought. But I know this much, Evelyn's father was convinced that his daughter wasn't like other girls. She wasn't just his daughter, she was something special. Something extraordinary. And he went to great lengths to keep her isolated, to keep her from interacting with the world. He wanted to keep her safe, yes. But he also wanted to control her, to mold her into something he believed she could become. Jonathan's head spun. You're telling me that her father thought she had some kind of special ability? Olivia nodded, her expression somber. That's right. And that's not the worst of it. Evelyn's father didn't just lock her away to protect her from the world, he believed the world was a danger to her. He thought there were people out there who would do anything to exploit her, to use her for their own gain. Jonathan's mind was racing. He didn't know whether to believe Olivia or not. But the weight of her words was undeniable. Where is she now? Does she know any of this? Jonathan asked, his voice tight with emotion. Olivia hesitated. She knows. Or at least, I think she does. But she doesn't remember everything. There are pieces of her past that she's buried deep inside herself. She's blocked them out, trying to forget. And that's the part that scares me the most. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. If Evelyn didn't remember everything, then what else was she hiding from him? Was there more to the story than even Olivia knew? I've said too much, Olivia whispered, standing up abruptly. You'll have to ask her, Jonathan. You're the one who's closest to her now. She needs to remember the truth, but only when she's ready. With that, Olivia turned and walked out of the room, leaving Jonathan alone in the dimly lit house. His mind was a whirlwind of questions, doubts, and fear. What did Evelyn's father know that had driven him to such extremes? And more importantly, what was Evelyn hiding? He left the house that day with more questions than answers, but one thing was certain, he wasn't giving up. He would find the truth, no matter what it took. For Evelyn. For both of them. The following week, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over him. Every interaction with Evelyn seemed to be weighed down by the secret she carried. No matter how much she tried to hide it, he could feel the walls closing in on both of them. She was more distant now, her smiles forced, her laughter strained. The conversations that once flowed naturally now seemed awkward, like they were treading on dangerous ground. Evelyn had become more closed off than before, retreating even further into herself. She didn't mention her father, her past, or even her aunt. It was as if the revelation from Olivia hadn't happened at all. Jonathan, however, couldn't forget. He couldn't forget the chilling conversation he'd had in the abandoned house, the cryptic truths that were still lingering in his mind, just out of reach. His mind raced as he replayed the conversation over and over again. Olivia had told him that Evelyn's father had believed she was something special, something extraordinary, but what if that was true? What if Evelyn's father had uncovered something about her that even she didn't understand? Jonathan found himself unable to focus at work. Every email, every meeting, felt distant and irrelevant compared to the whirlwind of thoughts that consumed him. He needed answers, needed to understand what was happening to the woman he loved, the woman who seemed to slip further away from him every day. But what more could he do? The situation seemed to have no easy solution, and yet, he couldn't help but keep pushing forward. Every day, he scoured through Evelyn's old photos, letters, and journals, hoping to find some clue that would unlock the mystery. Her past was hidden behind thick layers, but he knew that eventually, he would uncover the truth. It wasn't until late one night that he received a call that would change everything. It was Evelyn's voice on the other end of the line, trembling and afraid. "Jonathan, I need to talk to you. It's about my father. I've been hiding something from you." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He hadn't heard her this shaken before, and it was clear she was on the verge of breaking down. "What's wrong, Evelyn?" His voice was calm, but his heart was pounding in his chest. "What is it? What happened?" I don't know where to begin, she whispered. But I've been lying to you. I've been lying to myself too. Jonathan's mind raced, but he didn't interrupt. He knew this was the moment she had been holding back from him. I think it's time you knew the truth, she continued, her voice shaky. About what happened when I was younger. About what my father did to me. What I thought was normal, was far from it. Jonathan's stomach tightened. What are you talking about, Evelyn? There was a long pause, and then she spoke again, her words heavy with emotion. My father, he didn't just lock me away to protect me. He was afraid. Afraid of what I could become. Afraid of what I might be capable of. Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. What do you mean? What could you be capable of? I don't know, she replied softly. I don't remember everything. But I've been having these strange dreams, visions. And in these dreams, I see things that happened in my childhood. I see him watching me, controlling me, trying to force me to be something I didn't understand. I didn't want to remember. Jonathan. I buried it deep inside of me, because I didn't want to face what I might be. Jonathan's heart raced as he listened. This was the first time Evelyn had acknowledged any of the things Olivia had told him, but there was more to it, something darker, something that still haunted her. Evelyn, he said softly, you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here for you. Whatever happened, we can face it together. I promise you, I won't leave you. I don't want you to leave me, she whispered, her voice breaking. But I don't know how to explain it. I've always felt different. There were things I could do, things I could see, that others couldn't. And my father, he thought it made me dangerous. Jonathan's mind was spinning. Dangerous? But why would he lock you away? I don't know. Evelyn's voice quivered. I never understood it. But now I think I do. He thought I had powers. That's why he isolated me. He thought there were people out there who would use me, who would take advantage of whatever it was that made me different. He kept me hidden because he was afraid of the world. Afraid of what I could do to it. Jonathan's thoughts raced as he processed this new information. Powers? Was Evelyn truly capable of something beyond the ordinary? He didn't know what to think. But one thing was clear, her past was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. You've been hiding this for so long, Jonathan said softly. Why didn't you tell me? I was scared, she admitted. Scared of what it meant. I didn't want you to look at me differently. I didn't want to be that person, someone with something dangerous inside her. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. But it didn't. Jonathan's heart ached for her. He could feel the weight of the burden she had carried for so long. The secrecy, the isolation, the fear, it was all too much for one person to bear. I'm not going anywhere, Evelyn, he said firmly. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. We'll figure this out together. You're not a danger to anyone. I promise you that. Evelyn didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, the silence hung heavily between them. But then, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I think my father knew something I don't, she said. I think he was trying to protect me from something, but I don't know what. I need to remember. I need to understand what happened to me, Jonathan. Because something tells me, that whatever it is, it's not over. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. What was Evelyn talking about? What was this something that was still out there, lurking in the shadows? But one thing was certain, whatever they were about to face, it was going to be far more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. I'll help you remember, Evelyn, Jonathan said, his voice full of determination. We'll get to the bottom of this. You don't have to face this alone anymore. Evelyn's voice faltered. Thank you, she whispered. The call ended, and Jonathan sat in silence, processing everything he had just heard. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something much larger than they had anticipated. The truth was out there, hidden beneath the layers of Evelyn's memories, but what would it mean for both of them once it was uncovered? He knew one thing for sure: they were only scratching the surface of a much darker mystery. And now, it was time to go deeper. The air was thick with unease as Jonathan walked through the quiet streets, his thoughts spiraling faster than he could catch them. The conversation with Evelyn had left him with more questions than answers, and a sense of dread gnawed at him. What was this strange power Evelyn believed she had? Was it real? Or had years of isolation and fear warped her perception of reality? The phone call had shaken him to his core, but it had also brought clarity to something he had been sensing for weeks. Evelyn's past was far from ordinary. And now, with her admission of hidden powers, Jonathan felt the gravity of their situation pressing down on him. As he reached his apartment, he took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing mind. He knew Evelyn needed him more than ever. But what could he do? How could he help her uncover the truth when she didn't even fully remember it herself? He sat at his desk, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. The stories Evelyn had shared with him haunted him. She had always been mysterious, but now it seemed as though every story, every glance, every word had been part of a larger puzzle. What was her father really protecting her from? And why hadn't she ever told him the full truth? His thoughts kept circling back to the mention of her powers. Powers. Jonathan had never seen anything extraordinary in Evelyn. She was just Evelyn. Kind, beautiful, a little distant at times, but nothing out of the ordinary. Or so he thought. But if there was more to her, more that even she didn't fully understand, then he had no choice but to uncover it. The next day, Jonathan called Evelyn. He needed to talk to her, needed to understand more. But she didn't answer. Her voicemail kicked in, and he left a message, trying to remain calm despite the panic rising in his chest. Evelyn, it's Jonathan. I just want to make sure you're okay. Please, call me back when you can. I need to understand what's happening. Hours passed, and Jonathan became more restless. Evelyn wasn't answering her phone. He tried texting her, but still no response. His concern deepened. Was she okay? Was she safe? Or had she been overwhelmed by the things she had started to remember? He couldn't sit still any longer. He needed to find her. Jonathan drove to her apartment, his heart pounding with each mile he covered. The thought of Evelyn in distress, alone with her fears, was almost too much to bear. She had trusted him with pieces of her past, and now he needed to return that trust. He couldn't let her slip away, not when she was on the brink of understanding what had been hidden from her for so long. When he arrived, the building's lobby was eerily quiet. Evelyn's car wasn't in its usual spot, which only made Jonathan's anxiety grow. He texted her again, but there was still no response. He stood there for a moment, his hand resting on the door to the elevator. Something didn't feel right. There was a strange stillness in the air, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Jonathan didn't waste any more time. He took the stairs two at a time, his pulse racing as he reached Evelyn's floor. He knocked on her door, but no one answered. He knocked again, louder this time, but still nothing. His stomach twisted in knots. Something was wrong. Without thinking, Jonathan turned the doorknob. To his surprise, it gave way easily. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, quiet apartment. The soft glow of the city lights outside filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. Evelyn? Jonathan called, his voice trembling with concern. There was no reply. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. Everything was in its place, her shoes neatly lined up, her coat draped over the back of a chair. But something felt off. There was an unnatural stillness to the air, as if the space had been frozen in time. He moved cautiously, his footsteps barely audible on the hardwood floor. As he approached her bedroom, he noticed something strange, a single, folded piece of paper on the bed. His heart skipped a beat as he picked it up, unfolding it with trembling hands. It was a letter, written in a neat, elegant script. "Jonathan, I've left. I need to understand what's happening to me. Please don't look for me. I'm not ready to explain everything. I promise I'll come back when I've figured things out. Please don't worry. I'm safe. But I need to do this on my own." The words hit him like a wave. She had left. Evelyn, the woman he loved, had left without a trace, without telling him where she was going or why. The letter was cryptic, filled with a sense of urgency, but it also carried a plea for him to stay away. She was pushing him away again, but this time, it felt different. She wasn't just retreating into herself, she was running from something. Jonathan's mind raced as he read the letter over and over again. What had driven her to leave? Was she really in danger? Was this part of the mystery she had been trying to unravel? His thoughts turned back to the conversation they had had just a few nights ago. She had admitted to having strange dreams, visions that seemed to unlock pieces of her forgotten past. She had said she didn't want him to look at her differently. But how could he, when everything about her was so much more complicated than he had imagined? His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Olivia. "Jonathan, you need to know something. Evelyn isn't just running from her past. There's something she's afraid of. Something she can't control. You need to find her before it's too late. The truth is more dangerous than you realize." Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. He quickly texted back, his fingers trembling. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Olivia didn't reply right away, but a few minutes later, a new message appeared. "You don't understand. There's a reason her father kept her isolated. He believed she had powers she didn't even know she had. And now, those powers are starting to manifest. She doesn't want anyone to know, especially you. But the truth is, she's not just afraid of her past. She's afraid of herself." Jonathan stared at the screen, his mind racing. Powers. She had mentioned them before, but he hadn't believed it. Not really. But now, everything was starting to make sense in a way that terrified him. Evelyn's father hadn't been just trying to protect her, he had been trying to control her, to keep her from realizing the full extent of her abilities. And now those abilities were beginning to emerge. His thoughts raced as he tried to process everything Olivia had just told him. What did this mean for Evelyn? Was she truly a danger to herself and others? And why hadn't she trusted him with the truth? He had no choice now. He needed to find her. Before it was too late. The search. Jonathan spent the next few days frantically searching for Evelyn. He contacted everyone he could think of, her friends, her co-workers, anyone who might know where she had gone. But no one had seen her. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. Olivia's words haunted him. She's afraid of herself. What did that mean? Was Evelyn in control of whatever powers she had, or was it possible that she was losing control? Every clue he uncovered seemed to lead him in circles. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on them. Something he wasn't prepared for. His mind kept returning to the letter she had left behind. The words were clear, she didn't want him to find her. She wanted to face this on her own, to figure out what was happening to her without anyone interfering. But Jonathan couldn't just walk away. He couldn't let her face this alone. He needed to find her, no matter the cost. Jonathan stood at the edge of the small, secluded cabin, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The forest surrounding him was dense, almost suffocating in its silence. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant chirp of crickets. It was late, the moon barely visible through the thick canopy above, but Jonathan had no choice. Evelyn's letter, combined with the cryptic messages from Olivia, had led him here. He had to find her. He had to make her understand that she wasn't alone. He had followed the faint trail for hours, driven by nothing but desperation and love. Each step brought him closer to the truth, but also further into the unknown. The further he ventured into the woods, the more he questioned if he was doing the right thing. What was Evelyn afraid of? What was the truth she was trying to hide? And why hadn't she trusted him enough to face it together? He had spent days searching for her, hitting dead ends at every turn. But Olivia's message had been clear: Evelyn was in danger. And the truth about her powers was the key to understanding what had driven her to run. Powers. Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something dark and dangerous lurked just beneath the surface of the woman he loved. But could he really believe it? Could he accept that the woman he had married was someone entirely different than he had imagined? He had to believe. He had no choice. His love for her outweighed any fear or doubt. As he walked up the narrow path leading to the cabin, Jonathan's mind raced. What would he find when he opened that door? What if Evelyn had already gone too far? What if the powers she was discovering were more than anyone could control? The door creaked as Jonathan pushed it open. The cabin inside was dimly lit, a single candle flickering on a small table. The air was thick with the smell of incense, and the faint hum of energy seemed to pulse from the walls themselves. It was as if the entire cabin had been charged with an unseen force. Jonathan stepped inside cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. The door closed behind him with a soft thud, and he immediately felt the weight of the silence press down on him. Evelyn was here. He could feel her presence, even though she was nowhere to be seen. The room was small, with only a few pieces of furniture, an old armchair by the fireplace, a low wooden table, and a small bed in the corner. He scanned the room, his eyes falling on a figure sitting in the shadows by the window. Evelyn. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. She didn't seem surprised to see him, but there was a sadness in her expression that tore at Jonathan's heart. She was more fragile than he had ever seen her. The woman who had always been so strong, so controlled, was now a shadow of herself. Evelyn. Jonathan's voice was barely above a whisper as he stepped closer to her. I've been looking for you. I've been worried sick. You didn't have to run away. Evelyn didn't look at him right away. Her gaze remained fixed on the dark forest outside the window, as if she were searching for something beyond the trees. I had to leave, she finally said, her voice tinged with regret. I couldn't stay. I couldn't let you get caught up in this. You don't understand what's happening to me. Jonathan took a step forward, his heart aching at the brokenness in her voice. I understand more than you think, Evelyn. I'm not going anywhere. I love you. We'll figure this out together. You don't have to face it alone. Evelyn finally turned to look at him, her eyes filled with tears. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know what I've done. What I'm capable of. Jonathan's heart clenched. What do you mean? What are you capable of, Evelyn? What is it you're so afraid of? She shook her head, her hands trembling as she reached for the edge of the table. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to make you understand. It's not just memories, Jonathan. It's not just dreams or visions. There's something inside me. Something dark. Something that's waking up. Jonathan's mind raced. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but there were still so many gaps. What do you mean by waking up? Is it your powers? Are you losing control? Evelyn's lips parted as if she were about to speak, but no words came. She closed her eyes, as if the very thought was too painful to put into words. Jonathan stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Evelyn, talk to me. I need you to tell me what's going on. I won't leave you. You're not alone in this. She looked up at him, her face pale with fear. I don't remember everything, Jonathan. But I remember enough. My father knew what was happening to me. He knew what I could do. I think he was trying to protect me, but maybe he was also trying to contain me. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. Contain you? What are you talking about? What did your father do? Evelyn stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. She walked to the small window, staring out at the dark trees beyond. My father believed that I had powers that no one should have. He thought that if I could learn to control them, I would be a danger to everyone. But the truth is, I don't even know what these powers are. I don't know what I can do. Jonathan's mind spun as he processed her words. Powers. Her father's fears. Everything was starting to make sense, but at the same time, it felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, peering into an abyss he wasn't sure he was ready to face. What kind of powers are we talking about? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Evelyn didn't answer right away. Instead, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if summoning the courage to speak. I don't know, she said finally. But I think it's something connected to the mind, something that lets me see things before they happen. I can sense people's emotions, their fears. I can feel their thoughts, their intentions. I can influence them, make them see things that aren't real. It's like I can control them, without them even knowing. Jonathan's chest tightened. That's not possible. Evelyn turned to face him, her eyes dark with the weight of what she was revealing. It is. I've seen it happen. I've felt it happen. And I'm scared, Jonathan. I'm scared of what I might do if I can't control it. The room seemed to grow colder as Evelyn's words sank in. Jonathan's heart raced as he realized the truth. Evelyn wasn't just running from her past, she was running from herself. And if she couldn't learn to control her abilities, then the consequences could be catastrophic. I don't want to hurt anyone, Evelyn continued, her voice breaking. But I don't know how to stop it. Every day, it gets stronger. Every day, I feel it pushing at the edges of my mind, ready to break free. Jonathan reached out and gently took her hand in his. Evelyn, we'll figure this out. We'll find a way to stop this. You don't have to be afraid anymore. We'll get through this together. Evelyn shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how, Jonathan. I don't know if I can control it. I don't know if anyone can help me. Don't give up, Jonathan whispered, pulling her into his arms. I'll help you. We'll get through this, no matter what. As they stood there in the dimly lit cabin, the weight of their situation pressing down on them, Jonathan knew that they were on the verge of something far greater than either of them had ever imagined. The darkness inside Evelyn was more than just a secret, it was a threat. A threat that had the potential to destroy everything they had fought for. And as the night stretched on, Jonathan made a promise to himself, he wouldn't let her face this alone. No matter how dangerous it became, he would be there, standing by her side, until the very end. The days that followed were a blur for Jonathan and Evelyn. After that fateful night in the cabin, where Evelyn had admitted the terrible truth about her powers, they both tried to make sense of what lay ahead. The weight of the situation pressed on Jonathan's chest like a stone, but it wasn't just the fear of Evelyn's powers that consumed him. It was the fear of losing her. They had decided to leave the secluded cabin, knowing they couldn't hide forever. Evelyn was afraid of her own abilities, but Jonathan had become convinced that she could control them. The question, however, was whether they could unravel the mysteries of her past and find a way to stop the darkness that had been growing inside her for years. They drove through the night, heading for a place Evelyn had once mentioned. A small town at the edge of the forest, a place she had never really talked about. But the way her eyes had flickered when she mentioned it, the hidden hint of recognition, made Jonathan realize it was important. Something about that town held the answers they needed. They arrived just before dawn. The town, nestled between rolling hills and thick forests, looked peaceful, almost idyllic. But to Jonathan, it felt like the calm before the storm. Evelyn had insisted on staying in a small, nondescript inn just outside town, away from prying eyes. She wasn't ready to face her past, at least, not yet. But Jonathan knew that time was running out. As they entered the inn, the air seemed to change, thick with the promise of something ominous. The innkeeper, an elderly man with graying hair and a suspicious look, barely acknowledged their presence as he handed them the key to a room in the back. Evelyn's eyes darted nervously around the lobby, as if she were expecting someone to appear, someone who knew her secret. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Jonathan asked, his voice low as he followed her up the narrow staircase. Evelyn nodded, but there was a tension in her shoulders that Jonathan couldn't ignore. "I think so. I'm not sure. I haven't been here in years. But I have to try." When they reached the room, Evelyn immediately locked the door behind them. She sank onto the bed, her eyes closed as she rubbed her temples, trying to fight off the exhaustion that had been following her for days. Jonathan watched her, his heart aching for her. She had always been strong, always so sure of herself. But now, she was a woman torn apart by fear and uncertainty, the weight of her abilities threatening to consume her. "Do you want to talk about it?" Jonathan asked gently, sitting beside her. "Whatever it is, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Evelyn opened her eyes and met his gaze. "I've spent my whole life running from the truth, Jonathan. I've tried to bury it, to pretend it doesn't exist. But I can't keep running. Not anymore." Jonathan squeezed her hand. "You don't have to do this alone." Evelyn took a deep breath. "I'm not just running from my past, Jonathan. I'm running from what I am. I was born with these powers, but I never asked for them. My father tried to control me, tried to contain me, but the more he tried to suppress me, the stronger it became. I never wanted this. But the longer I kept it hidden, the harder it became to keep it in check." "Your father knew about this?" Jonathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "He knew. He was trying to protect me, but he also feared what I could become. He thought he could control me, manipulate me. But I don't think he understood the full extent of what I could do. I don't think he ever realized that I could destroy everything." Jonathan's heart sank. He had known Evelyn had powers, but the depth of her fear, the burden she carried, was something he couldn't fully comprehend. She was carrying the weight of a lifetime of secrets, and it was all coming to the surface now. "What happened to him?" Jonathan asked. Evelyn looked away, her expression distant. "He died. I don't know if it was because of me, but I've always believed that something I did caused it. Maybe I couldn't control it, maybe I wasn't strong enough, but he died, and after that, I had no one left. So I ran. I ran from everything, from the guilt, from the fear of what I could become." Jonathan's throat tightened. "But Evelyn, you don't have to run anymore. You're not that person. You don't have to carry that guilt with you." Evelyn turned to face him, her eyes searching his, desperate for some reassurance. "But Jonathan, what if I hurt you? What if I can't control it? What if I become a monster?" Jonathan reached out and cupped her face gently in his hands. "You're not a monster, Evelyn. You're just scared. But we'll figure this out together. We'll find a way to help you control your powers." Evelyn's tears finally fell, and Jonathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. The weight of their situation pressed on him, but he refused to let go. No matter how hard it got, he wouldn't give up on her. Not now, not ever. As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, there was a knock at the door. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't expecting anyone, and neither was Evelyn. He glanced at her, and she looked equally surprised. "Who could that be?" she whispered. Jonathan moved cautiously to the door, glancing through the peephole. His breath caught in his throat when he saw who stood outside. A tall man, wearing a dark trench coat, stood with his hand raised, ready to knock again. Jonathan's heart raced as he recognized the man's face. It was her father. "Stay here," Jonathan whispered urgently to Evelyn. "Don't open the door. I'll handle this." But Evelyn was already standing, her eyes wide with panic. "No, Jonathan. He can't see me. He can't know I'm here." Jonathan stepped in front of her, his mind racing. "We don't know what he wants, Evelyn. It could be dangerous." The man outside knocked again, louder this time. "Evelyn," the voice from the other side of the door called, calm and cold. "I know you're in there. Open the door. We need to talk." Evelyn froze. Her father's voice had always had that effect on her, commanding, cold, like steel. And she could never resist it. Jonathan glanced at Evelyn, who was now trembling. He stepped back, signaling for her to stay hidden. "Stay down," he whispered urgently, then walked toward the door. His hand hovered over the handle, but he was unsure whether to open it. Every instinct in his body told him this man, Evelyn's father, was not someone to be trusted. And yet, the desperate need to understand the truth about Evelyn's past, and to protect her, pushed him forward. He opened the door. "Jonathan," the man said with a nod, his face betraying no emotion. "We need to talk about Evelyn. It's time for the truth to come out." Jonathan didn't know how to respond. His mind raced with questions, with the overwhelming sense of dread he felt in the man's presence. But one thing was clear, Evelyn's past, and her future, was about to change forever.